Hello, welcome. Thank you for joining me for this online information session about the National Endowment for the Humanities Archaeological and Ethnographic Field Research Program. My name is Meredith Mink, and I'm a program officer in the Division of Research at NEH. This is what I'll be covering today in this webinar. First, I'll go over the goals and the scope of the Archaeological and Ethnographic Field Research Program. I'll talk about the eligibility criteria for the program. I'll get into some of the program details, including our matching requirement. I'll discuss the evaluation criteria and NEH's review process. And I'll finish with some frequently asked questions that we get in this program. Overall, this webinar is designed to help you determine if your project is a good fit for the field research program and how to craft a good application. So the National Endowment for the Humanities, or NEH, does its work across 6 divisions. Each of these are focused on a different kind of work and audience. The Division of Research Programs supports the work of scholars collaboratively and individually on projects that embody exceptional research, rigorous analysis, and clear writing or communication. The Archaeological and Ethnographic Field Research Program is one of several opportunities that we offer within the Division of Research. So at NEH, each of our programs has its own web page that offers all the critical information for you to understand the program. So what you're looking at right now is a screenshot of the field research web page. Note that on the right-hand side, you'll see a grant snapshot, and that gives you some of the key dates and most of the critical information that people are looking for. Some other things that you're going to find on this web page, you'll find our program guidelines. So this is what we call our notice of funding opportunity. And this is the complete guidelines for the program and the most important document for applicants. So you'll want to read the guidelines carefully. On the web page, you'll also find the link to this webinar, links to application materials. We've also posted some sample applications, and these are examples of applications that were successful in this program over the last 3 years. And at the very bottom of the page, you'll find some program statistics. So the major goal of this program is to support rigorous field research that employs archaeology and/or ethnographic methods. You can apply to this program for field-based research that employs both or one of those methodologies. So just to be clear, projects don't need to include both archaeology and ethnography. They can be either archaeologically based or ethnographic projects. And standalone ethnographic projects are welcome and eligible. Of course, we fund field-based projects in this program. That fieldwork can take place anywhere in the world. But this is not a program for research that primarily takes place in the library, the archive, or with legacy collections. This program is for empirical fieldwork, and the fieldwork should be in service of answering significant research questions that are relevant to the humanities. So while you may employ social scientific methods in your project, we really want to see that you're answering questions that have significance to the humanities and that you're contributing to humanistic scholarship. Demonstrating your project's broad significance to the humanities is really especially important in this program. And I'll talk a little bit more about why that's the case later when I talk about the evaluation criteria. But at a broad level, we're looking to fund projects that make a compelling case for how the research is driven by humanistic questions and goals, and how you're going to be adding to humanistic conversations. We also support projects that are conducted by individual scholars or teams of collaborators. And we encourage early career scholars to apply as project directors in this program. The, the Archaeological and Ethnographic Field Research Program is an institutional program. So what that means is that an eligible institution applies for the grant, and the grant is awarded to the institution. The institution is, of course, also the award holder. So colleges and universities are the most common category of applicant that we see, but I want to note that we also accept applications from other types of eligible institutions. So nonprofit organizations that are registered as 501c3s are eligible to apply. State and local governments and their agencies are eligible, and of course, federally recognized Native American tribal governments. So let's get into the program details. Field research grants can be requested for periods between 4 and 36 months. So the amount of funding that you request will vary on the amount of time that you need to complete your fieldwork. You can request up to $75,000 per year, up to a maximum of $150,000. So let me break that down. If you anticipate a field season that will last a year or less, you would be able to request up to $75,000. For a project that requires more than a year of field work, between say 1 year and up to 36 months or 3 years, you could request up to $150,000. This year's application deadline is September 25th, 2024. And projects for this year's award cycle would be able to start as early as June 1st, 2025, and as late as May 1st, 2026. Note that our evaluation process takes time and that awards are not announced until April. So you want to take that into consideration when you're applying. I'll talk more about the review process and the overall timeline in a moment. But do keep in mind that if your work depends on funding to get, say, field permits to do archaeological work, you want to keep that longer timeline into consideration when you apply. In this program, we make approximately 6 awards per year. So based on our average application numbers, that means that our funding ratio is approximately between 11 and 12%. So I don't want those numbers to discourage you. This is a competitive program, like all NEH programs, but of course you can't get a grant if you don't apply. And it's also important to note that you can ask for the feedback and the comments that our peer reviewers make on your application. And if you do not get an award, we would encourage you to do that. Ask for your reviewer feedback, revise your application accordingly, and then resubmit at the next deadline. You can apply to this program as many times as you want. I also want to note that staff like myself will read a draft of your project proposal if you send it to us in the template that we provide on our program website. So our draft review process has changed a little bit this year, and we've provided a template that is posted on the website as a PDF document. You can download that, and we request that you use that, fill that out as your draft application. And if you submit that to our email by June 17th, 2024, we will provide you with feedback on your project. Again, I just want to emphasize that you have to use the draft template that we've posted. We no longer will read and provide feedback on complete draft applications, and that's just due to staff time constraints. But with that said, that template allows for approximately 1,600 words that are structured into sections and respond to specific prompts. So you'll get several pages to explain your project, and you'll get it still allows for substantial feedback from staff. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit more about the disciplines and methodologies that we support in this program. We do see applications from a broad variety of disciplines. This isn't just a program for archaeology projects, right? So we see applications from project directors that are working in ethnolinguistics, ethnomusicology, sociology, cultural anthropology, classics, even some literary studies projects. The discipline doesn't matter as much as the methods and the project's aim to answer and examine humanistic questions and themes. With ethnographic projects, approaches vary, of course, but we're really looking for some level of immersion in host communities or with participants. That's the expectation for the program in order for an application to be competitive. So the prime example of that type of approach would be participant observation. But we also allow for and support projects that would include things like surveys, interviews, the collection of oral histories, that kind of thing. But a project that proposes, for example, to collect information via online survey alone, or had no intensive field-based research or site visits and trips, would not be suitable or eligible within this program. In terms of archaeological methods, we support field survey, remote sensing, excavation, digital scanning, ethnoarchaeological methods, etc. And as I noted, we don't support projects that are primarily working with legacy collections in this particular program. While that is a worthy endeavor, that kind of work would have to go to another NEH program. And all projects, of course, would need to respect any relevant federal or foreign regulations. So one thing that's important to note that is if you're working in the United States and you are proposing to do an archaeological project that includes any sort of ground disturbing activities, so things like excavation or you're taking core samples, you would need to remember that Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act would apply. And there's more information about Section 106 in our program guidelines, but it's just something to take into consideration if you have a project that's proposing to do archaeological excavation within the United States. Okay, and so at NEH, we use the term project director versus principal investigator. That's something to keep in mind as you're writing your application. We don't penalize people for using the term principal investigator. We understand that that is a commonly used term. It's just that the NEH terminology is project director. The project director on any project must be affiliated with the applicant institution. So again, the application will come from an eligible institution, and the project director would be someone who is officially affiliated with that institution. Project directors are not required to be tenured, but most of the project directors we see would hold a PhD. The requirement would be that they hold either a PhD or an equivalent terminal degree. Postdocs could be a project director. As far as the NEH guidelines go, that is perfectly fine. It would depend on if the institution would allow a postdoc to be the project director on an award. And while projects can include collaborating scholars, we don't permit co-directors in this program. So in a case where there are 2 or potentially more leaders on a project, you would list one project director in your application, and everybody else would be listed as collaborators for the purposes of the NEH application. Another important detail of this program is that project directors that are tenured must ask for a match. So if the project director is a tenured faculty member, applicants must request at least $20,000 in matching funds. And I'll talk about this in a little bit more detail here. So this is a required matching component of this particular program. So again, when the project director is a tenured faculty member, you must include in your budget a request for at least $20,000 in matching funds. That means that the project must raise $20,000 from third-party sources to release that $20,000 in matching NEH funds. Institutional support would not qualify as a third-party source. But examples of a third-party source would be things like grants from non-federal organizations such as foundations, and gifts from private donors. So in the application narrative, you'll want to include a brief note about your plans to raise these funds. And in your budget, you'll want to discuss how you're going to be using these funds. This funding doesn't have to be in hand at the time of the application. So for all the details about this matching requirement, you can see section C2 of the Notice of Funding Opportunity for this program. So that's the program guidelines, and there's all the details are listed in section C2 of those guidelines. So we see a lot of proposals in this program for research that involves local communities and local participants. And NEH strongly encourages proposals for projects like that work closely with local collaborators and communities, to work with those collaborators in the co-production of knowledge and the preservation of culture. So that is to say that we discourage extractive approaches to research. And to that end, applicants should describe their plans for consultation and collaboration in the applications. You'll want to discuss any established relationships, for example, that you have with your research participants, and any relationships you have and how you will build relationships with host or descendant communities, if applicable, of course. And again, remember that if your work includes archaeological excavation that's going to be occurring in the United States, there is a consultation process that is part of Section 106 requirements, and you'll want to take that into account when you're creating your project timeline. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the kinds of activities and things we support in this program. Obviously, this program is designed to support field expenses. So some examples of activities and costs that we support are travel to field locations, accommodations while you're in the field equipment, permit fees, salaries for field crew. We would also support salary replacement for project directors or collaborating scholars. And we would also allow for honoraria for participants, for example. Like all NEH programs, there are rules about what we cannot fund. And there's a full list of what we do not fund in this program on page 29 of our guidelines in that notice of funding opportunity. One thing I want to highlight is that we do not fund field schools in this program. So we're really looking to support research-focused fieldwork, not the training of students in this program. You could, however, include students, either undergraduates or grad students, in the project design as researchers and collaborators. That would be fine. Students can be included as in the budget as field crew, for example, but you want to explain how they're contributing to answering the research questions, what activities they will be part of, what they will be doing in the field. And of course, in the budget, you would include how much you would be paying them to do that work. Projects that focus on post fieldwork analysis or on publication are not suitable for this program. So what I mean by that is if your project consists predominantly of lab-based analysis, so you're really mainly focused on analyzing field materials, or if your project is mainly focused on archival research, or again, on analyzing legacy collections, we would not fund that kind of work in this particular program. There are other opportunities at NEH where you could apply for funding for that kind of work. And I'll note too that we fully understand the importance and value of working with legacy collections. That's just not what we do in this particular program. And again, projects that are focused primarily on writing up the results of fieldwork are not appropriate for this particular opportunity. We would expect that the results of any field research that we funded would ultimately result in a publication or a field report of some sort. But the actual writing up and the dissemination of research is not supported under this program. So there's a little bit of wiggle room here. The spirit of the program obviously is to fund fieldwork, but some post fieldwork activities are allowable. So analyses that really need to take place during the grant period in order to directly answer research questions would be acceptable. An example of that kind of thing would be, say, the timely radiocarbon dating of newly excavated material could be included as part of the proposal, but it should only compromise, a small portion of the work plan and the budget. I will also note that we do allow for up to $5,000 per year for conservation and preservation in this program. So that can be a small amount of the work you do and the budget. And we also allow for up to $5,000 per year for community education and outreach. And that's with the understanding that some conservation and preservation work, like some community education and outreach, is really critical to successful fieldwork projects. Okay, so let's talk about the review process. There's a lot of text on this slide, but I wanted to highlight the program review criteria. So all NEH applications go through peer review. And these are the criteria that peer reviewers in this particular program use to evaluate applications. And we ask all our peer reviewers to evaluate applications based on the review criteria alone. So as you write your narrative, you'll want to keep these review criteria in mind. You can use that, for example, you can use the review criteria to, structure your proposal and really make a case for your project. And note that the first review criteria is related to the significance to the humanities. And that's really the first among equals in terms of our review criteria. And it's really key to competitiveness, right? You want to really articulate how you're contributing to building on humanities conversations and answering humanistic questions. And in terms of our review process, we typically assess ethnographic and archaeological applications separately in this program. So proposals that might incorporate both those types of methodologies would probably be evaluated with archaeology projects. And we recruit reviewers who have expertise that essentially reflects the application pool, but all of our review panels are interdisciplinary. So when your application goes through review in this program, it will be reviewed by people who have a background and expertise in archaeological or ethnographic methods, depending on your project. But they may not come from your specific subfield, and they may not have a sense of your particular regional focus. So it's important that you make a case for the significance and value of your work to a broad audience. You want to really think about how your research questions could inspire someone outside of your field or discipline. And as I mentioned earlier, NEH has a fairly long evaluation timeline. So let's just talk about what this looks like. So applications for this program are due in September. And then our peer review panels will meet in late November. After peer review, staff will draw up a slate of recommendations, and that will go to NEH's National Council on the Humanities for them to review all the projects that we're recommending for funding across the agency. And that takes place in March. The National Council is a 26-member council of people that are appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. And they can ask questions about the proposals that we're recommending or not recommending. And then finally, the chair of the endowment, Shelley Lowe, makes all final funding decisions. And notifications to applicants are sent out in April. So you're going to be applying in September, but you're not going to find out about the results of the competition until April. And you'll want to keep those steps in mind and that timeline in mind when you apply. So I've covered all the critical information about the program that I wanted to review today. And next, I'll get into a few frequently asked questions that we often get in this program. So the first one that we often get is, can fieldwork take place outside of the United States? And the answer is yes, we fund projects that take place all over the world. Again, the institution applying to the program must be a US-based eligible institution, but the fieldwork itself can take place anywhere globally. And recently we funded projects in Bermuda, Cambodia, Egypt, Ghana, Guatemala, Peru, and Poland, for example. Another question we get is, can we ask for funds to pay foreign field crew and collaborators? And again, the answer is yes, you can. You'll want to list these project members as consultants in the budget. And you'll also, of course, want to include a brief discussion of what they'll be doing and how much they will be paid. And that can be included in the budget justification document. So if the collaborators are central to the project, you would also probably want to list them as key personnel. That's part of the application package, is a list of key personnel. And I'll also note that NEH does not have any particular rules or regulations about how collaborators or experts or field crew should be paid or how much they should be paid, but you would just want to follow your disciplinary standards and best practices. And if there are any local standards related to pay that you're following, you could include a justification for that and the rate of pay in the budget justification document. Another FAQ that we get is, can we include costs for postdocs or students? And like I've mentioned, the answer is yes. We could and have funded postdoc salaries in this program. And you can include grad students or undergraduates as part of the research. And they can be paid on the budget, but you want to be crystal clear about how they're contributing to the research and the goals of the project. If you plan to fund a postdoc position through one of these grants, you want to be really clear about the kind of candidate that you'd be looking for to fill that postdoc position. You want to talk about what kind of background would be ideal for that candidate to possess, what kind of skill sets they'll need, and of course, you want to identify precisely what they'd be doing on the project. And again, postdocs in theory could act as a project director on one of these grants. That would just be up to the institution whether or not that was allowed. And finally, another frequently asked question that we get: I'm a tenured professor applying to the program through my university. Do I need to have matching funds figured out at the time that I submit the application? And like I've said, the answer to that is no. You don't need to have matching funds in hand at the time of the application. But you'll want to include those anticipated matching funds in the budget, how you're going to be using them. And you'll have up to 6 months before the end of the grant period to raise and certify those funds. NEH's matching funds will be released once you have raised and certified the gift portion. So if you're required to ask for a match, you'll ask for $20,000 or at least $20,000 in matching funds, and NEH will release our portion of those funds once you've raised and certified the gift funds. And a final question that we get is, are archaeology applications favored in this program? And the short answer is no. We do tend to get more archaeology applications in this program, but it's certainly not a program just for archaeology. I would say about 2/3 of the applications we get are for archaeology projects. So we do therefore tend to fund more archaeology projects. But I'll note again that typically ethnographic projects would be funded, reviewed separately. So briefly, what that looks like is, once we've gotten all the applications, we sort our applications into panels. And historically, we've run 2 archaeology panels, one for archaeology in the Americas, so like a world archaeology panel, and an old world archaeology panel. And all the archaeological applications are sorted onto those 2 panels, and they're reviewed by archaeologists. And then we have a third panel typically where all the ethnographic projects go. And so you'd want to keep in mind that if you're applying to this program with an ethnography project, it's going to be reviewed um, by an interdisciplinary panel of people who are familiar with ethnography, but there will be no, particular regional focus, or there won't necessarily be a disciplinary focus. Of course, we see a lot of anthropology projects, and there will always be at least one peer reviewer who's an anthropologist, but it will be an interdisciplinary panel with no specific regional focus. So you're going to want to speak broadly to the peer reviewers. Okay, so I've covered everything that I wanted to cover in today's webinar, and I want to end by saying that we're available to answer any specific questions you have about the program. You can just go ahead and email us with your questions. Thank you so much for listening, and good luck with your proposal.